Welcome back, everyone, to a brand new episode of the Crypto and Muay Thai podcast. I am very fortunate today to welcome my special guest, Peng Zhong. He is the CEO of Tendermint. For those of you who don't know, Tendermint is involved with one of the, currently as we speak, one of the more hotter digital assets that's going on within the space, with that being Cosmos. So without further ado, Peng, thank you so much for taking time out of your morning to join us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Chris. Thank you for inviting me onto this show.
Thank you so much. It is my absolute pleasure. So for those that might be listening or viewing that aren't familiar with yourself or some of the protocols or the networks that you're involved in, why don't you just give a quick background on yourself, and then we can just sort of just kick the conversation off from there.
Sure, sounds great. So a little about me. I'm currently the CEO of Tendermint, the company that built the Cosmos SDK and the one that launched the Cosmos Network. The Cosmos SDK is the most widely used proof-of-stake blockchain framework in the world. And it secures, I think, more than $6 billion USD worth of assets across various blockchains, including the Cosmos Hub and Binance Chain and quite a few others that are, I think, very hot right now, like Band and KAVA, Terra, projects like those.
Yes, I'm taking down notes, but yes, I completely agree, because you come from I'll just say like a useful perspective to the space. Like, you are an entrepreneur actually building something, and you're trying to change the future in and of itself, like right now. Whereas I'm coming at it more from a speculator perspective. So I know everything that's going on in this space. So KAVA 100% has been extremely hot. Band has been even hotter. And Cosmos, the Atom token, for those that are listening, has recently started to catch pace with those. So I've been an investor in Atom personally. So those are some of the things that I've recently really been keeping an eye on. But also Masari recently put out a piece, and I think they're doing a part 2 that was released today, talking about the comparisons between the Ethereum blockchain and the Cosmos blockchain, but then also some of the natural ways that can sort of break down the use cases. So you've got the price oracles, you've got different DeFi operations and applications and stuff like that, and what that could mean for Cosmos moving forward if it was able to gradually take away more and more market share from Ethereum as well.
Yeah, so I think this is all something that the Cosmos community is all very excited about, right? The idea of creating our own DeFi ecosystem around Cosmos that serves as an alternative, to the Ethereum ecosystem. And I think the primary difference, right, between the two ecosystems is that on Ethereum, everything happens right now on one blockchain, right? I'm not going to dive into Ethereum 2.0 right now, but as of Ethereum 1.0, all the DeFi protocols, all the value transfer, all the assets are stored on one blockchain, the Ethereum blockchain. And for us, the reason why we're building Cosmos is because we realize that there's a lot of limitations to all of these companies, these organizations and developers essentially working off of one giant spreadsheet, right? Imagine like multiplayer Google Sheets with tens of thousands of people editing it at the same time. That's Ethereum. And yeah, the one word that separates Cosmos from Ethereum is sovereignty, right? We are very practical, and we believe that many projects can happen siloed away from each other on their own chain. And of course, that begs the question, like, how do these interoperate with each other, right? If they're all on their own chain. And that is the biggest problem right now that we're solving as a community. So many of the core developers in the community and within our company are working together to launch the IBC protocol, the Inter-Blockchain Communications Protocol, which will allow all of these projects to remain sovereign chains, but to be able to exchange value, to be able to exchange assets and data with each other.
Got you. That's really, really interesting. And also, that's a really good analogy of Ethereum, likening to a Google spreadsheet where everyone in the world, or all the developers, are essentially porting into it and trying to make adjustments and come to consensus at the same exact time. That sounds like chaos. So that's actually a really unique perspective, but also it kind of falls in line with what we're seeing currently, or what we've seen historically with Ethereum as well, where there's been a lot of technical issues, but then also a lot of consensus issues that haven't necessarily happened in as a timely manner. So I even think that the transition over to 2.0 has not gone as expeditious as some of the developers within the community would have liked. So I think, when did you start seeing that as a potential opportunity for you to create an entirely different network to solve some of the scalability issues that you were seeing with Ethereum, or still see to this day?
Yeah, so I wasn't the original creator of this idea, right? I'm sure many people had this idea in the past. The moment they saw Bitcoin and they scaled out, what would happen if Bitcoin value rose and how much electricity it would consume, through proof of work. And one of those people was Jae Kwon, the original CEO and founder of Tendermint. He was CEO up until 3 months ago, and he still is part of the company as the chief architect. Right, he's spending a lot of time thinking into the future about what crypto means. Seeing how Ethereum is scaling into DeFi. How to make sure DeFi experiments continue to be scalable and continue to be secure. Without, let's say, taking down an entire blockchain with it. So he started this company early in 2014 with the concern of the environment, right, and how much electricity Bitcoin was using. So Bitcoin today uses roughly the amount of electricity that Switzerland uses on an annual basis. And that's a massive amount of consumption that, that we argue with proof of stake networks does not need to happen if people switch to proof of stake from, Nakamoto consensus, proof of work consensus. So with that in mind, all the way in 2014, right, 6 years ago, we started working on this together. I joined the company as the first employee in late 2015 with a background in design.
Interesting. So it was originally, you didn't look at it from an Ethereum perspective. You're like, okay, Ethereum's got, these issues, or maybe I just want to compete with it, or even do a money grab like we saw in 2017 with the ICO boom. You looked at it strictly as a solution to the proof of work scalability issue, specifically targeting the energy consumption.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when Tendermint Byzantine fault-tolerant consensus was created and invented by Jae Kwon, in 2014, Ethereum was barely beginning as well. There were sort of two, alternate. Sorry about the noise. I think the upstairs neighbors are doing something.
No worries.
Yeah, what was I? Yeah, so Ethereum was not even thought of as a competitor when we first started. And, to this day, it's still not a project we consider as a competitor. We want to work with Ethereum. And there are, great research being done into figuring out how we can connect from Cosmos into the Ethereum world through the idea of peg zones.
Interesting. So maybe it's going to be difficult to, let's double click into peg zones, because I want to understand more from that. Let's just go as far as we can with that before we start getting people in the weeds. But I'm really, really interesting. So let's talk more about that.
Yeah, so on a high level, what a peg zone is just a place for you to deposit Ethereum tokens like ETH or ERC20 tokens, right? Have a third party hold it for you, and they would issue you Cosmos ETH, Cosmos ERC20 tokens in return.
Okay.
And so you have to rely entirely, on this third party to hold these tokens for you, and which will allow you to, play around in the Cosmos ecosystem with these pegged ETH and pegged ERC20 tokens.
Okay, I got you. I see what you're saying. So essentially, a little bit almost identical to what Ethereum has been doing with wrapped BTC, with what they've been growing within the DeFi ecosystem. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, that's exactly correct.
Okay, got you. All right. So Jae Kwon has started Tendermint, has founded it, and How has that process been? So I've mentioned it several times on this particular podcast, and it's just sort of like a euphemism for life. You always start with like this high level theory, and you're like, this is the best thing since sliced bread. It makes perfect sense. But then once you actually get out in the real world and try to apply it in practice, almost not, 10 out of 10, it's entirely different. Doesn't necessarily mean that you have to start from scratch, but you definitely need to make a few pivots. So what were those for Cosmos or Tendermint whenever you guys were starting out all these years back, even beginning in 2015?
Yeah, I would say luckily there haven't been too many major pivots, but things have definitely taken much longer than we expected, in terms of development time.
So do you think that that is the byproduct of, I guess I would say, decentralization? So like you said before, Ethereum is one main blockchain. It's one network where everyone's porting in, whereas Cosmos is an aggregation or an amalgamation of different participants on the said network, which there's a trade-off. There's always a trade-off in life. So do you feel that the increased flexibility and scalability of Cosmos makeup was one of the reasons why it kind of took a little bit longer? Or is the technology that you're looking to kind of build out that far in the cutting edge that it took a few revisions? Because I mean, in this space, everyone is essentially creating the future as we sit here and speak.
Yeah, I would say it's much more the latter. There's been some very ambitious teams, like we mentioned in the past, like Band and KAVA and Terra, who decided to build these blockchains themselves using the SDK, which we provide, even though there's no interoperability protocol existing yet, right? So in large part, a lot of people who invest in these tokens and even the Cosmos Atom are hoping that the IBC upgrade goes well, that we'll all be able to connect these chains together and manage some sort of decentralized economy that will horizontally scale, because we expect almost all scaling will be taken care of through the idea of introducing more and more sovereign blockchains.
Interesting. So when is the target date for the release that of the IBC upgrade? Am I saying that right? IBC, is it IDC?
That's right.
IBC.
So we're wrapping together the upgrade of IBC with several other very great features for the Cosmos SDK under a name called Stargate. And this has been a community push from all Cosmos validators, Cosmos Atom holders, Cosmos core developers, and I'm hesitant to put dates to it because we've missed so many dates in the past as a community. But things are looking good. We're having weekly updates given by Zaki Munyan, who's the CEO of Occlusion, who's been leading this process. And the first test nets for Stargate look to be starting up, in the coming weeks.
Okay.
And we hope to have IBC, live on the Cosmos Hub and live on, all the other chains that are running the SDK. I would like to say by the end of the year.
Okay. Okay. So that's potentially huge news. So again, it's very difficult whenever you're making, it seems like whenever development or product development is involved at all to make declarative things, especially whenever you're trying to get a wide range of different stakeholders involved. But it seems like if that can come to fruition, that's potentially quite powerful, which might kind of align, which get a little bit of an additional boost of sentiment, given that might align with maybe like the first iteration of 2.0 of Ethereum, if it makes the transition over not in time, I believe.
Yeah, I believe Ethereum 2.0 seems to be moving along quite well, right? The Mandala testnet, I believe, just started recently, and people are starting to validate on that. So that's exciting to hear. I'm not really up to date on the current Ethereum 2.0 roadmap, but I do believe there are like multiple phases, right, over the course of months. So it's not clear to me yet when Ethereum 2.0 may launch mainnet.
Gotcha.
But we're really excited, to work with the Ethereum community in getting it to mainnet and also to collaborate with them. One project that we're working on in the community is this idea of Ethermint. Have you heard of it?
No, I have not. Please tell.
Okay, so Ethermint, what we propose as sort of ETH 1.5, as people wait for ETH 2.0, we have this solution waiting in the wings. It's not entirely complete yet either. It's currently worked on by the company ChainSafe, also based in Toronto. And the idea is it uses the Ethereum virtual machine, right? Letting you use all of Ethereum's tooling, things like the MetaMask wallet, or the Truffle suite, or Solidity, right? Solidity is the big one. You're able to use all the knowledge you've learned building smart contract apps on Ethereum, and you're able to use them on Ethermint.
Okay.
And so so the thing that makes Ethermint different than Ethereum 1.0 or 2.0 is that this entire EVM is built on top of the Cosmos SDK. So it is built to be, based on proof of stake from the beginning.
Okay, very, very interesting. That's one of the, so I hadn't heard of that. And I wonder if, I would say a decent amount of people in the community or just in the digital asset ecosystem has heard of it as well, because that has the potential to be something that is quite attractive for a variety of reasons. Like I mentioned earlier, Ethereum, even the transition over to 2.0, even for the very diehard developers, it's not something that it hasn't gone as quickly, I think, as a lot of people would look at. But also, whenever you kind of talk about that, it reminds me of something separate that I was having on a separate podcast, just talking about product market fit eventually whenever digital assets become way more mainstream. It's that the end user doesn't even know that they're engaging with a blockchain or anything like that. That isn't necessarily the case here, but it could be adding a value prop for developers or node operators or whoever it may be existing now that wants to engage with that without even knowing that they're actually flowing through the Cosmos SDK, which I think is something very interesting in and of itself. I'm thinking more from a speculation perspective, but also from a use case perspective as well.
Yeah, I think you raised a really good point, something that I really resonate with. Ever since I got into blockchain, and even before blockchain, right? I come from a design background, interface design, front-end development. That was my thing. I worked as a freelance web developer for 6 years, before getting, diving more deeply into crypto. And one thing I always think about as the community builds out these protocols and builds out these frameworks is how do we get mainstream adoption, right? I think there's a lot of tendency in the community to communicate primarily with other crypto speculators, crypto developers, and to compete in the space of crypto. But I think there's an opportunity that we're not seeing here, which is to expand beyond that into the greater, mainstream developer community of, mobile app developers, game developers, web application developers. And, in addition to something like Ethermint, which will bring on, a lot of Ethereum developers who are maybe unsatisfied with how much it costs to make transactions due to the high price of gas today, is how do we bring on mainstream developers? So that's one of the things that I'm focused on within the company right now. And our most recent product release is something called Starboard. And it's not something that's groundbreaking. It's based off of something like Rails, actually. But what it does do is it takes the Cosmos SDK, which is already widely used, by many of these new DeFi projects, and is able to communicate about the SDK in a way that web developers and mobile developers understand. So it's a scaffolding tool, right, that writes a lot of code for you and takes you through the process of developing, building, launching a blockchain in a process of minutes instead of hours.
Okay. So where do you think the initial push for that could come from? So meaning what particular area segments do you think that a blockchain solution might be more efficient, or just something that is desired despite the general friction that it takes to kind of engage with a blockchain solution at this particular point. Gambling, obviously, being one of the more notorious and well-known use cases. Is there anything else in your particular mind where you look at like this is the avenue or the sector I'm trying to tap into?
Yeah, that's the question we've been having internally. And there are, I believe, many sectors that could benefit from blockchain technology. You know, the most obvious one, right, is decentralized finance. Take the current finance industry and make it more open, make it more transparent, make it all recorded on the ledger, right? And something that's been, you know, a great idea that people have been having in the community. And, you know, a reason why a lot of people work in this community is the idea of accountability by organizations, governments, you know, large entities where it's entirely unclear, you know, where funds are going, right? And by being able to place them on chain, you're able to follow, you know, the trajectory of a token, you know, from one party to another, or, you know, through a process of hundreds of hops around the ecosystem. And that level of transparency would be great to have, you know, in larger organizations. And beyond that, right, if we want to go into the use cases that I'm really passionate about, which is, you know, gaming, social networks, and the idea of collectibles. And, you know, collectibles sound like some small thing, but one of the biggest markets today, right, is the fine art market, which is, you know, billions of dollars a year, and can also be represented on chain through the idea of non-fungible tokens, or NFTs. So there's a lot of areas that that have potential compelling use cases on blockchain. And my goal with the Starport tool is to make that, you know, functionality readily apparent to mainstream app developers.
Okay, that makes sense. How, so outside of the usability for Starport, do you think that there is a competitive advantage, for lack of a better word, for engaging with the Cosmos SDK versus saying like, all right, let me look at Tron, let me look at EOS, let me look at Ethereum or anything like that? Because, you know, I realize you don't consider yourself direct competitors, you know, with Ethereum and stuff, but, you know, at the end of the day, there's still a select group of these individuals that you're kind of vying for mind share and having hot new assets, for better or worse, that are within this extremely burgeoning area of the market. 2020 is clearly the year of DeFi within this space. Definitely helps get on the radar of some of these new people. So do you think that there is a competitive advantage outside of Starport and maybe just the general makeup of the Cosmos SDK that might be something that, you know, an additional sweetener whenever you go to these individuals to say like, hey, I realize the learning curve might be a little something at the beginning, but here's X benefit, here's Y benefit, and ultimately if you can get past X and Y, you'll get Z benefit.
Yeah, sure. So I think one clear difference that we have today is, you know, primarily sovereignty. You're able to take the code, use it as you wish. There is no restrictive licensing, right? It's all Apache 2.0. You can use it, do whatever you want with it. You know, it doesn't even have to benefit the value of the Atom token in the end, right? We've provided this SDK, funded through millions of dollars, you know, worth of R&D, and it's freely available to anyone who want to build their own business, right? And I think that is one very compelling advantage to the Cosmos ecosystem. You know, we're not shilling you on a token at all. We're saying that, you know, take this, do whatever you want with it. If you want, you know, connect to us through IBC. If you don't want to, you know, create your own competing ecosystem, because we see this as the future, right? And, you know, we're not trying to take advantage of you.
Okay. What was I going to say? So you've mentioned a couple times the Atom token. So for those that don't know, that's just the native token of the Cosmos ecosystem. So we've mentioned it a few times. Let's talk about that a little bit. What is the Atom token? What is its utilization in the current makeup or formation of the network?
Yeah, so we imagine in the Cosmos ecosystem it'll be set up in a way that, a lot of blockchains end up connecting to centralized hubs because there is a certain level of processing power that needs to happen, to sort of move tokens across different chains. And it makes the most sense if there are, more highly valued chains sort of at the center of a number of chains that connect to it. So why does this have to happen? It's because the Cosmos Hub, right? The current valuation of the atom is based on what the atom can do in the future. So right now the atom does, very little. But one of the biggest things we're looking to add, that will increase the utility of the atom is this idea of shared security. So within the ecosystem, there are a number of chains built on top of the Cosmos SDK, right? But there are very few chains that have a greater market cap than the Cosmos Hub. I think the Cosmos Hub is currently over 1 billion USD. If you try and check coincap.io or CoinGecko. And this is the original chain that spawned, every other chain built on top of the SDK, because the people who fundraised for the Cosmos Hub put that money into building the SDK and made it available for everyone else. And because the Cosmos Hub has one of the highest market shares of SDK-enabled chains, the security level of the chain is the highest, right? It's a pretty simple equation due to the fact that the proof of stake network, right? The higher the valuation of the chain, really, it can be argued the more secure the chain is.
Okay.
And what do we do with this security? The security, we believe, should be shared among other chains, other chains that need a higher level of security.
Okay.
I can explain the one possible use case, right? I mentioned Ethermint earlier, which hasn't launched either, but it's a chain that supports the EVM, allows you to port over your Solidity applications of Ethereum, relatively painlessly. But how do we get developers to port over their smart contracts, right? The reason why Ethereum is so big today is because, it's like, I don't know, worth how much, over 40 billion, I think, in market cap today. And the market cap by itself is a signifier to developers that this is going to be a stable platform. It has lasted 6 years already. It'll probably be here for the foreseeable future. And this level of security makes people feel confident that this platform will exist for a long time, right? But for something like Ethermint, which currently has no backing, has no value right now, how do we get developers to start using it? Well, this is where shared security comes in. We'll lend, some of the security on Cosmos, currently over 1 billion USD worth of security, over to Ethermint. And we hope this, tighter level of connection between the two chains will, make developers feel like that this ecosystem also has a future and that it will also be here for the long term.
Okay. I think that's really, really interesting. And it makes sense. It goes back to the central premise that you guys or I guess the central design where you have is decentralization for the sovereignty as you describe it. So that makes sense given the core focus, or I should say the core design. How does the Atom token, how do the rewards flow into the Atom token? So for any of the listeners that might be watching this, they're like, okay, I like what this guy's saying, like keep going. How has the staking mechanism and the reward mechanisms for staking been built in, and what was the general logic behind that?
Sure. So Cosmos staking is relatively simple. There is a variable inflation rate that targets 2/3 of all atoms staked as security. And that inflation rate ranges between 7% and 20%. So for example, if we have 1/3 of all atoms staked on the Cosmos Hub, maybe the inflation rate would be much higher, 15, 18%, right? To encourage more people to stake their tokens. And as the amount of staked tokens rises up to 2/3 and even above 2/3, the inflation rate will drop down to down all the way to 7%, to signify to the community that we have enough tokens staked. The rest of the tokens are open for for other uses,
Okay.
speculation or trading, just staying liquid in your wallet instead of being staked.
For sure. I mean, I describe it as dirty sometimes, which it isn't necessarily. But speculation is positive. Like I said before, the hype and the sentiment surrounding Kava and some of these other different exchange, or not exchanges, but digital assets that are built on Cosmos SDK is extremely powerful, and obviously is being attributed now to not just the Atom token, but also some of the interest within the Cosmos SDK as well, especially with the potential successful, fingers crossed, IBC release as well. So
yeah, I mean, while speculation is probably the only other use of atoms right now, other than staking, that's not always going to be the case. There are experiments in the ecosystem to create an automated market maker style DEX in the style of Uniswap, and possibly put that on the hub. So, aside from staking, you may want to provide liquidity for other tokens through this idea of a DEX on the hub.
Okay.
And we see atoms being used maybe by other chains, once IBC is launched. So there's going to be a huge need for atoms in the future.
I mean, I tend to agree, just based upon sort of what I'm hearing here as well. For those that are listening, he refers to it as the inflation rate. It's the inflation rate, but also staking reward percentage. It's kind of interchangeable. So just as an apples to apples comparison, you mentioned some potential new utilizations of atoms, obviously theoretical right now, or maybe in very early stage of development within DeFi. Whenever I was talking to Florian Liss of Staking Facilities, he had mentioned something that had just caught my ear, just talking about the ability to do indexation of staking coins or proof of stake networks, where it's like, okay, we've got Cosmos over here, we've got Solana over here, we've got Polkadot over here. Let's figure out a way for a speculator or a node operator that wants to have exposure to maybe all three. They only need to hold one particular coin and can still reap the rewards, the inflation rate rewards for staking of all three, without necessarily needing to hold all three and have different, non-custodial holding for that. Was that something that you guys were looking at? I think he mentioned it in reference to you, but if not, is that something that you have heard before within this community? Because that's incredibly interesting from my particular perspective for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, so I don't know if we're working exactly on that. I think the closest parallel to what Florian Liss had said, to the idea of an index fund of proof of stake tokens, involves the use of shared security, right? We think that the atom may be that token, right? If you hold the atom, it may serve as an index fund of IBC-enabled tokens. So, I can't say the same for Polkadot or Solana right now. There's an interesting aside, actually, which I want to dive into for a few seconds.
Let's do it.
Yeah, IBC is being worked on by a team within the Cosmos ecosystem for Substrate, which is what Polkadot uses for their SDK. And I believe the Interchain Foundation, which funds most of Cosmos development work, is also looking into what it takes to support IBC for Solana. So, there might be this future where Polkadot-based chains and Solana-based tokens can also coexist and be transferred through the Cosmos. So going back to the original idea, so how shared security can enable, the index fund of IBC enable. Well, I'm speaking too fast here. So how the atom can serve as index fund, right? It's through shared security, right? If the atom is used to secure other blockchains through shared security, then it will serve as, this index fund across multiple chains.
Okay.
Because let me explain. So we see that in the future, chains, may want to gain this extra amount of security offered by the hub, and the atom is the way to do it. But then, if the atom is serving as a token for multiple chains, then how does that work, right? So we see a future where many chains in the future may have two tokens. may launch with two tokens, right? One is the staking token in the vein of the Atom, and the other is their gas token or their fee token. So depending on what the founders of the chain want, if they care about something like shared security, they want to gain the extra level of security offered by the hub, then they might start off with two tokens. And the token that's based on the Atom may end up changing to the Atom in the future, which will allow gas on that chain to be paid for by the gas token, but allow the security to be managed by the Cosmos hub.
Okay. Now I think I'm starting to see kind of like the future and how that could potentially evolve. It's security as a service. So let me break this down how I see it in my mind, and you let me know if I'm totally off or not quite there just yet. But let's just say a new chain, a new protocol is looking to launch that is going to solve ABC use case or looking to address that. They're launching, but like with anyone that knows, especially within this space, your security is tied to the robustness, the amount of people or stakeholders that you have involved within the network. So typically whenever these projects start, they're quite small. They've got a core group of people that believe in it, but it's not necessarily a super expansive community that you will get over a few years, and also through growing the network effects, which are incredibly prevalent within digital assets. So you're saying that if it was like, all right, I'm going to start a new protocol based upon whatever, it's like I can have our token to be able to support the transactions that are going to be eventually done on the network. But in the meantime, to ensure the security of it, which is an additional way to hopefully attract more and more participants, developer participants on it, or real world use cases on it, thinking about DeFi, because it's like, why would I issue a bond on Cosmos or a new chain for, let's just say, $1 billion if I wasn't 100% certain on the security? I can sort of go to my security as a service provider, Atom, leverage them at the beginning, and then eventually down the line decide whether or not I want to make that choice to I've got enough and I can handle that myself, or just say it's worked out well enough and we can just sort of toss that off to Atom for the foreseeable future.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
And I want to emphasize that there's a spectrum to this idea of shared security, right? I think many chains will want to start off sovereign to begin with, but like you said, building the network effect is incredibly costly and very difficult to do. So what the hub is offering in terms of shared security is the idea to take a shortcut to community building and be instantly secured through the Cosmos hub, which will make it more likely for people to start using your zone immediately for higher value transactions. Like maybe the most obvious example is a DEX, right? That maybe starts off on its own, but no one's going to use a DEX or put funds on that DEX, where the value on the DEX exceeds the value of that network. So we're helpful by backing that DEX on a separate zone with the 1 billion plus valuation of the hub. Will make that DEX much more of an interesting product to start using immediately. But we want to make sure that this is an option, right? You do not ever have to use the hub security. You can always create your own network. And I think that, to me, is what separates Cosmos from other projects like Polkadot, in which every single chain does use shared security.
I really like that, in all honesty, and for me, it rings most true to DeFi applications. So I've said it before in other podcasts, and hopefully, I don't think I've offended anyone. If I have, then whatever. Is I really like the idea of decentralized finance in theory. I think at its current stage, there's still a little bit of bugs that need to be worked out. But one of the principal bugs that we've seen, sort of like with some of these protocols, whether it be most recent, I believe with Opine, we've seen a lot of hacks. So security is of the utmost importance, which we're at an early stage. So at the end of the day, there's not that much value that is actually being lost. But if it's going to fulfill its end goal of sort of supplanting centralized financial conglomerates or huge organizations, then a certain layer of security, not just from a technical code perspective, but also, from a network perspective as well, is absolutely mandatory. So I think shared security is a really, really interesting premise for developers that maybe have a new idea or a new chain that they can do it better, more secure from a technological perspective, maybe from a privacy perspective, but don't have the time to build out the security right now. They can focus on their higher value purpose, which is X, Y, or Z, whatever I sort of, regurgitated right there, and sort of delegate security, have high level security from day one with shared security, potentially with a network like Cosmos as well.
Yeah, people in the Cosmos ecosystem love Ethereum. A lot of us are ETH holders as well. And we're really excited to see, the explosion of DeFi activity happening on the Ethereum chain. We're also, frankly, we're terrified by it, right? There are many people operating on the Ethereum blockchain at the same time, right? As in the example of a Google Sheet, a multiplayer Google Sheets, right? And we are afraid that this is going to cause more hacks in the future, right? Possibly hacks bigger than the DAO hack, years ago. And this is going to be an eventuality for Ethereum to have to handle. And it's something that, we're concerned of happening on, the Cosmos Hub as well. But we're hopeful that because one of our core values is the idea of sovereign blockchains, a lot of these experiments might happen not on the hub itself, but on different chains. And, the atom holders on the hub will vote to see whether we want to, share our security with these chains, with these unproven new chains, or whether not to do so at all because they're too risky and experimental. Another example from Ethereum, I want to quickly dive into is, CryptoKitties, right? CryptoKitties basically halted the Ethereum network for quite some time because everyone wanted to play with CryptoKitties. And we believe this is one clear example of where, this sort of use case for Ethereum did not even have to happen on ETH. But, with something like Ethermint, CryptoKitties can build their own project on top of Ethermint, keep it as a sovereign zone. Over time as the project matures, it can either stay a sovereign zone or connect to the hub. And that way, the hub is firewalled from these more risky effects of new chains and new projects that start up, but is able to safely, share its security with, chains that have proven their use case and proven their market and also their stability over a longer period of time.
I think that it makes an incredible amount of sense. I don't have a technical background, but to me, that sounds like testing environment. So, at the fund that I run, we do automated algorithmic trading, and there's always like a testing environment before you push things into the live environment. So you train it in the wild, work out as many bugs as possible before you release it or you train it in the laboratory, work out as many bugs as possible before you release it into the wild. And that's very endemic of software development. So that's kind of how that sounds, where it's like you've got a bunch of test chains where you can work out the bugs, and then once they've proven that they are stable enough or have got the right amount of use case or blah, 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 whatever it might be, then you can bring it into the main chain, which is not the case on Ethereum as well, which is why, personally, I think the biggest risk to Ethereum could be DeFi itself, because everything is starting to just stack on one another. So you've got this new thing, this lending thing, this next thing, we've got yield farming, we've got this, and DEX. And the technology at the base layer has been shown over time that there's some flaws in it, and it needs to be updated. Obviously, we're going from 1.0 to 2.0. So whenever you already start to stack layers of complexity on what, for all intents and purposes, is a flawed base layer, you could have a hell of a problem in the future if there's ever sort of like a cataclysmic event where you look at it almost like an avalanche, where that isn't possible on Cosmos for all the reasons that you guys sort of articulated.
Yeah, that's exactly the point that I was going to raise, which is testing of DeFi protocols and products that build on top of other DeFi protocols all are really happening on Ethereum mainnet, right? Testing is happening on mainnet, and that's a big red flag for me. So we're hopeful not to repeat that in the Cosmos ecosystem, and to allow these experiments to happen, possibly not connected to the hub, and to introduce them over time.
I got you.
In a more stable fashion.
So we got a couple minutes left. Where do you see the future of Cosmos going? So before we wrap, this space is it moves so fast. So let's just say over the next 2 years, where do you see the Cosmos network and/or the Atom token moving towards?
Yeah, so in the Cosmos network, I foresee an explosion in the number of blockchains that exist. We're betting on this internally within Tendermint. The product that we mentioned we're building earlier, Starport, is only the beginning to what we hope to offer to application developers. And we're working our hardest on onboarding mainstream developers, who have potential blockchain use cases, to get them to start off with Starport, to scaffold up an app in a period of minutes, and to show them that they can participate in this ecosystem, without having to learn the entire history of blockchain up until this point, or spending weeks learning how to use the SDK. So approachability and lowering the barrier to entry is something that we're really passionate about. So we expect to see many, many more chains in the future.
Got you. Is there one exogenous threat that sort of concerns you for your chain? So obviously we were just talking about Ethereum and how it kind of scares you guys a lot. Is there anything else outside of the particular Ethereum Ripple effect that maybe keeps you up at night?
Yeah, I think Cosmos Network as a whole has a very bright future, but for the Cosmos Hub, there's more question marks over the usefulness of the Cosmos Hub. The more we support sovereign blockchains, the more the question of whether the hub is useful or not, is part of that, line of thinking. And so that's why we're working so hard on things like shared security, and hopeful that, due to the fact that the hub has had one of the biggest head starts, in front of other Cosmos SDK chains, and due to the fact that it's been stable for, more than a year and secures more than $1 billion in assets, it will serve as, as a natural hub for other chains, and can help, like we said before, shortcut the need for other chains to build a community and to build that network effect by adopting Cosmos Hub's shared security.
Got you. I mean, from everything that I've heard, I find it incredibly interesting, and I'll be very, very curious to keep an eye on you guys, in particular to some of the deadlines that we were talking about beforehand. So fingers crossed that the deadlines will go off without a hitch, because quite frankly, I think those are just additional validation points that lend more credibility, but also more comfortability to a lot of the areas of opportunity, whether it's outside developers already within the digital asset community that look at Cosmos and say like, hey, well, maybe I want to play within this space, or maybe I want to engage with them a little bit more directly. So I'll be really curious to watch how you guys move and how you guys execute for the rest of 2020, whatever 2020 has in store for us. So with that, we'll wrap up. Peng, I really appreciate you taking time out of your morning to be able to have a conversation with me. And hopefully I'll be able to look forward to having you again on the podcast to be able to talk about all the awesome deadlines you've hit and all the additional traction and growth that you guys have made for the network as well.
Thank you, Chris, for giving me this opportunity, to articulate some of these thoughts that I've been having about the Cosmos ecosystem.
Awesome.
As a team and as a community, we're really hard at work implementing some of these things that we've talked about on this call. So, I'd be glad, to be on the show again to talk to you about the things and the progress that we've made so far.
I cannot wait for that next one. So until the next time, everyone, stay safe out there, and I will talk to you soon.